a convicted felon or a doddery old man. I'm trying to be as charitable as I can because his failings appear only to be related to his age. And I've been brought up to respect the elderly, but I'm not necessarily that enthusiastic about someone who is struggling so badly on that TV debate to be in the White House.
Yeah, the nearest parallel is quite recent, actually. Ronald Reagan, before Joe Biden, Ronald Reagan was the oldest American president. So he was 69, 10 years younger than Biden when he became president, and he was 77, 8 years later when he finished. And I mean, I was in the States at the time during Reagan's second term, and he was losing it seriously.
Yes, he was.
When I remember seeing Reagan, he would dry in front of the cameras, and Nancy, who was with him all the time, very important to him, she'd whisper to him. You could hear him. She'd say, "We're doing all we can." And he'd say, "We're doing all we can." I saw that lots of times, and Reagan would fall asleep in meetings and so on. However, Reagan had a very good staff around him. He was a good delegator, and the public liked him. Now, it's a bit similar with Joe Biden. Joe Biden has a good staff. His White House is actually a good organization, but the difference between him and Reagan is the public don't really like Joe Biden in the same way. And I think that's his problem. And he is older than Reagan. I mean, Biden is the oldest president that the United States has had. I mean, the general age of US presidents, the median age is about 55, 57. Rather than 80 or 78, 79, which is what Biden has been. So he is considerably older than the average. And I mean, you know, America's had some very young presidents. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt, he was the youngest. Jack Kennedy, I mean, he was a young president. He was only, 44, 45, maybe 46 when he was assassinated. So the Americans are used to quite young presidents. And a lot of people have become president in their 40s and 50s, and usually they are ex-presidents by the time they're in their mid-60s. So by the time they reach normal retirement age, they are an ex-president, and they have 20 years of life afterwards as an ex-president.
Is it possible that the whole world has gone completely mad about this, and that if we take a step back, what we've seen is one bad 90-minute TV appearance? It was an important one, but it went wrong. I mean, I'll be honest, I am struggling to reconcile that the image of the man I watched during the debate with the man at the North Carolina rally. I mean, his voice was strong. He seemed strong. He seemed, witty and sharp. I can't, like I said, I can't reconcile it.
No, we're all trying to get used to it. This was a car crash interview, no question about it. Barack Obama, he said, made a statement yesterday, which I think probably summarizes the problem that you have and I have as well, I guess. He said, look, everybody has bad nights, and he obviously had a bad night. There's no disguising that. But the choice is between a man who puts the nation first, as opposed to Trump, who puts himself first, and a man who tells the truth, as opposed to a man who constantly lies. And that's the choice. The age of the man and the infirmity is a short-term issue, is what Obama said. But the problem we have to face is that whether Joe Biden really can, at the age of 82, embark on another 4-year term, which would take him to the age of 86. I mean, that seems astonishingly optimistic. I mean, that's what most Americans would imagine. I imagine would think now.
What would you counsel? Because as I understand it, the only person who could decide for him to stand aside would be himself. Now, you could do it in the sort of traditional Tory pattern of sending your grandees and saying, "You've got to go, you've got to go, you've got to go." If that scenario occurred, there's so little time. Would you imagine Kamala Harris would step in, which could be even worse for the Democrats' fortunes, or would they do some kind of new primary, which, I mean, it'd be unprecedented?
No, they can't do a new primary because Biden's got overwhelming support in the primaries, and he goes to the convention in August just to be crowned, in effect. The decision would have to be his. And the reality is there are 3 people who could help him make that decision: Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and the most important of all, Jill, his wife. Yes. If she says to him, look, if you step down now, the country will treat you generously, and you'll go down in history as the man who did the right thing, and you're an honest man who did the right thing. If you carry on and it all fails, and you fail to beat Trump, and Trump becomes this awful madman president, then history will always criticize you for being stupid and proud and so on. And so, I mean, I think Jill gets that from my understanding of it. It's, go down in history generously now, or go down in history as an absolute folly. Now, that decision can only be made by him. And it would have to be an emergency arrangement whereby somebody else would emerge. There wouldn't be any voting process. Kamala Harris is a non-starter because she's just not popular. She would lose. Yeah. It would have to be. I mean, people are talking about Newsom and people like that. There are some, new tyros in California or the Midwest. It would have to be a relatively new face, and it won't be Michelle Obama.
I was just about
for
to
all sorts
ask.
of reasons.
Just about to ask, but no.
Almost certainly not. She hasn't campaigned for Biden because of a personal issue she has in relation to one of her close friends, and I think she'd be tarred with the brush of disloyalty. I think so. I don't think she's a runner, although she might have been in different circumstances. It would have to be one of these younger men. Probably a man from the Democrat heartlands, the new Democrat heartlands, but particularly maybe California. And it would have to be somebody who looked completely the opposite, very dynamic, young, thrusting, mid-40s young man who's got some ideas. And they could wipe the floor with Trump, at least in terms of the arguments, because they could expose all of his lies and ridiculous statements that he makes. It'd have to be somebody like that, and they'd have to simply agree on it. But it won't wait until until August, Matthew. If he's going to step down, it's got to be next week or the week after.
Completely agree. And I have to say, and I'd imagine the listeners would agree, that if it was you doing the persuading, I think he'd stand down immediately. I felt like quitting my job and walking away from LBC. You did such a good job of talking me down. So maybe things will change. Michael Clarke, I'm indebted to you, former Director General of RUSI. Listening to that, Dr. Marianne Trent, and I want to talk to Marianne because, as I was saying to Michael, I have been brought up to respect older people. I'm aware that many tribes would always choose elders to lead them because they have accrued wisdom. That doesn't seem to be happening here with Biden. Dr. Marianne, are we being disrespectful simply because of his age?
Hi, Matthew.
Morning.
Thanks for having me on. Lovely to speak to you. I think it's really difficult when it comes to age because actually, we are taught to kind of defer to our elders, aren't we?
Yes.
Certainly in the West. But we also need to feel like what we're listening to, what we're being around is kind of sound and lucid. And I think that's where some of the kind of concerns have been raised over the last couple of days.
Do you have concerns with your clinical psychologist hat on?
It was certainly very uncomfortable to listen to, but not necessarily for poor country, poor America. Just, this could be a variety of things, actually, Matthew. So, we often will immediately leap, and especially if this is, rubbing up against painful stuff for your listeners, for their family members or someone they care about, you might immediately run to something like dementia, which actually is a group of different conditions, different dementias. But actually other factors could be at play. And, you and Michael, who was great, by the way, spoke about that really quick change, but that could be related to other factors. So, some of the things that you might think would be dementia could be something like depression, or even in an older person, something like a urinary tract infection can lead to confusion, distress, upset, being a bit kind of sleepy, even hallucinations and being kind of angry, or thyroid diseases or diabetes or Lyme disease or vitamin B deficiencies. Like, there's loads of things that can be ruled out that might not necessarily mean organic long-term changes such as a dementia. I
just can't understand why anybody in their 80s would want a second go at being president of the United States. I mean, you should be putting your feet up and enjoying yourself, shouldn't you?
Well, it wouldn't be my preference, but, age is just a number. And I'm reminded of when I've worked in older adult services that actually we can disempower people by thinking that forgetfulness and kind of absences come routinely with older ages. They don't really. It comes with cognitive changes. And, I'm reminded that my grandfather died at 95. He spent his 90th birthday on his shed roof fixing it. We are so different. We need to treat everybody as different. So we're not looking at what's typical for somebody that age. We're looking at what is typical for Joe Biden, and the really good point that Michael made is, what do the people who actually really know him well and know what he's like on a great day, what do they say about him? How are they noticing these changes? And this might be something that you notice with somebody that you care about as well. How can you begin to have those conversations gently and sensitively? It's a really, really complex issue.
It truly is. The fact that he's, president of the free world can, I suppose, only exacerbate those difficulties. Dr. Marianne Trent, thank you, because I thought it's really important to look at the positives and not just sort of, oh, he's old, he should go, because I think that's such a negative approach. And if we're talking about leaders should go because they've got poor approval ratings, I think Biden's is 38%. I should point out Rishi Sunak's is 20%.